Welcome to episode 222, the greatest day in motorsports 5 edition of the Grip Strip podcast. My name is Philip Matthew. I'm your host, and I'm with my co-host, the iRacing Indy 500 champion, a computer genius, gentleman and a scholar, and somebody who was trying to go for his second Indy 500 win, just like the guy that ended up getting his second Indy 500 win yesterday. His name is Josef Newgarden. What's going on, brother?
Out there, of course, got all the greatest day in motorsports and everything that took place this past weekend. So, yeah, lot to get into with everything that took place all on Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean, would be remiss to if we didn't go and think about and give our thoughts and our condolences in our why we're here today or what this day is all about. It's Memorial Day for the men and women that pay the ultimate sacrifice for us to be able to enjoy the greatest day in motorsports. And I mean, family, immediate family, I'm not sure on your end. I know I don't, but the fact is I've had family that did fight, and and to lose a loved one that way, but they were doing it for our country, for this great country that is the United States of America, even if you have segments of the population that don't believe that or live in an alternative universe. Just like salute your shorts out there yesterday with Austin Dillon and Hold My Watch and my Depends. But we'll get into the Indianapolis 500 and Cyborg Newgarden becoming the first repeat Indianapolis 500 winner since Helio Castro-Neves. All that happened late in the race there, multiple fuel strategies. Race ran relatively quick, even with all the carnage that seemed to take place. The Coca-Cola 600, even with the nonsense they had on top of their usual pageantry, got started on time. They ran out a couple of stages and got past halfway. And once they got past halfway, there was weather, so that played a role. And we'll get into everything that went on there. Kyle Larson was supposed to, or at least was trying to attempt to run 1,100 miles. He ran 500 at Indy, was in the process of getting back to Charlotte and in position to possibly get in the car at Charlotte to finish probably the last, 220 miles of the race, with a chance to possibly win the race before the rain and whoever made a decision to call that race at that point. Monaco Grand Prix was a total procession. The top 10 positions did not change, even with the pit stops, largely because there really weren't any pit stops due to a first lap crash between Sergio Perez, a former winner of the Monaco Grand Prix, and two Haas cars, which were disqualified. So we'll talk about Charles Leclerc winning his home Grand Prix, showing emotion, Ferrari getting the podium, 2 out of 3 places in the podium, and Oscar Piastri tying his best career finish with a second place in the Ayrton Senna helmet tribute car, which they should run at Brazil too, but who knows if they will or not. Other things coming along, the penalty points for Kevin Magnussen. You add the fact that the fighting between Gasly and Ocon has probably gotten to a point where they're debating possibly sitting Esteban Ocon, which is interesting to look at considering Carlos Sainz needs a job. So something to look at there for silly season. MotoGP and MotoGP and all the bikes there, they ran at Catalunya. So we'll go over that Grand Prix, Catalunya Grand Prix. We'll also talk about F2 and F3 in Monaco. Those are part of the GSP roundup. Xfinity and trucks ran as part of the build-up to the weekend itself. Was William Clyde Elliott II getting an Xfinity win in the Hendrick 17 car in what was essentially a throwback to the old days of bushwhacking with the amount of cup guys that were in the race in top equipment. When you consider Ricky Hatton, aka Kyle Busch, going and after getting his punked by freaking Richard at the All-Star race, he had to jump in an Xfinity car to feel better about himself and not win there the way he isn't winning in a cup car anymore. You had Noah Gragson driving Ferret Jones Racing in a Ford. You had Clyde. You had Keebler Gibbs out there amongst the drivers that were trying to run that race, but Justin Allgaier was the early dominant presence, at least. We'll get into Nick Sanchez somehow or another climbing the king of the hill, which was Corey Heim, or is Corey Heim. Corey Heim, even with his second place finish, gets DQ'd. Really isn't going to make much of a difference to Corey Heim right now. He finishes last the rest of the regular season. He's still making the playoffs, and there's a pretty good chance that he'd still finish in the top 5 in points anyways because of how weak the playoffs are after basically himself and Christian Eckes and then Nick Sanchez. I really don't think there's anybody else. And my guess, Ty Majeski, sorry. But we'll get in all that, all those series, and we'll preview Cup and Trucks at Gateway, Xfinity at Portland, the Detroit Grand Prix for IndyCar, taking all that great energy we had from the Indianapolis 500 and then taking it to a shitty street course. Since that's just great promotion by Penske Entertainment, let's take one of the most dynamic Indy 500s in recent memory, proving once again that Indy cars are great on big ovals, on ovals in general, and then we go to a street course. I mean, Belle Isle was bad. Hopefully they've done some resurfacing at the streets of Detroit. They have a cool pit road that has 2 sides to it. And Flavor Flav's going to be there to bomb like he's been bombing for the last 20 or 30 years because he doesn't know where the hell he is. But he's a fan of Will Power, so I guess that's worth something. So he's probably porking. Well, no, I'm not going to go there. I would go to hell on that one. That's one thing. And before we even we'll get into your exploits, Josh, of preparing or getting towards the iRacing Indy 500 and all that preparation going on, and we'll call it a day. But that's one thing. I guess that's part of the reason why that I've figured out a governor. A governor was installed probably because of the COVID shots. Haha. So like I would have said what I was about to say there about Flavor Flav and Will Power, but I held back, and probably for multiple reasons. But I think one is I have greater sense than, even though I know that it really isn't going to get back to Will Power, I don't really want the juju that comes with it either. But speaking of bad juju, in terms of the Indianapolis 500, it was a bad time for the Hondas. They struggled the whole entire time there. They had no top speed. They had cars that were competitive, but very few and far between. on the flip side of that, the guy who was nailed for cheating and basically, spoke out even though everybody knew he was cheating, and he was face and abs. They didn't make that happen on the Borg Warner. Now that he is a repeat winner, maybe Josef Newgarden will be face and abs on the Borg Warner Trophy this year. He got to do the great picture with his wife and his baby son kissing the bricks. Thanks to DJ and Todd Parrott for that. But Josef Newgarden ripped the heart out of Pato O'Ward going into turn 3 on the final lap of the Indianapolis 500 after a 4-hour rain delay. It all built up to that crescendo, and Josef Newgarden going and having a roid rage induced run into the stands again like he did last year. All that creatine and all the other stuff that he's on is definitely something. He's got like Carl Edwards vibes now. Like he's got like douchey Carl Edwards vibes, but the fact of the matter is he's won 30 races and 2 of them are Indy 500s. And he's a 2-time IndyCar Series champion. He's basically the mirror of, like, he's a perfect example of Penske perfect. Penske front row, first time that the front row was swept since Penske did it in 88. The Penske team ends up winning the race. Scott McLaughlin early in the race had a fast race car, but the way strategy started to work and pit stops, and then he had a clutch issue that probably didn't assist him in any way. Will Power's car was dog crap basically the whole entire day, so he never really was a factor, but Root Beer Floathead filled in for him there 2 years in a row, where that 14 car actually had a chance to win the Indianapolis 500 again. I mean, freaking Stingray Robb led a bunch of laps in this race. That tells you how weird and how crazy this Indy 500 was, and how dominant the Chevys were. I mean, especially once you gave them some clean air. God damn, is she a new? Yeah, I guess she's a new bachelorette. Piece of ass. But either way, going and Stingray Robb, I guess that's a bad thing to say when we're talking about Stingray Robb since he's a Jesus freak, but he ended up leading the third most laps in the Indianapolis 500. I mean, that's crazy to think for a guy that can't even finishes 25th every single week or whatever the hell he does, to end up leading that many laps at the Indianapolis 500. Shows you the kind of advantage these Penske Foyt cars had, but and how much of an advantage Chevy had. But as I mentioned in our outline offline itself, that the McLaren cars were there. They were lurking the whole entire month. They were a factor in the road course. And then in qualifying as well, to a point, Alexander Rossi wanted that pole. The look on Alexander Rossi's face after the race itself, and the fact he basically couldn't talk, told you all you needed to know. Pato O'Ward's heart being ripped out in turn 3, probably because he shouldn't have went for it in turn 1. He was hedging that a caution would come out, but they weren't going to throw a yellow unless somebody flew in the air. They weren't going to go and throw a yellow, so he was going to have to race back to the line, and there was really no way he was going to hold Newgarden off. He had a run on the backstretch coming to the white flag. That, in theory, if he takes that run, it sticks. Newgarden passes him on the front stretch. He gets that same opportunity again on the back stretch, or gets to prepare for a run coming off of turn 4, coming to the checkered flag for the Indy 500. becomes a runner-up for the second time in the last 3 years. But he got some good points. Doesn't count for anything because nobody gives a shit about points at the Indianapolis 500. In the end, Josef Newgarden is a 2-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. First, as I mentioned earlier, first repeat winner since Helio Castro-Neves. In 01 as a rookie, and then in 02 in the controversial finish that the longer we go past that, the better off we are that it was Helio that won that race and not Paul Tracy. For as much of a tool as Paul Tracy is, if he was an Indy 500 winner, he'd be like the Joe Rogan of Indy 500 winners. But either way, I mean, and for Helio, he actually had a good day. He was the one car of his own team because he is part owner of Myers Shank Castro-Neves Racing. He was the only one that actually had anything to show for it. The finish wasn't indicative of how well he ran for the majority of the day. On a day where Hondas were up against it, Josh. But we'll get into the results here. Josef Newgarden Pato Award. The finish 1-2. Scott Dixon still chasing that second Indy 500 win. Had a good race car. Put a block on a Pruitt fade on Ryan Hunter-Reay. Ryan Hunter-Reay showing that he still has it with the ability to keep his car generally under him. It was destroyed, but in the end, it could have been way worse for him. Alexander Rossi 4th, Alex Palou 5th, Scott McLaughlin, the pole sitter, finished 6th, Kyle Kirkwood 7th. So there, in the end, Honda had 3 cars in the top 7. Kirkwood had to come back from a speeding penalty and other issues. Root Beer Floathead, Renus VK, Connor Daly winning the award for biggest mover in the race, and Callum Ilott in what will be his last IndyCar race for the foreseeable future, since Deo Porcher is going to take over that car starting this weekend and for the balance of the season. Callum Ilott had issues. They had issues at the start of the race in terms of electronics, trying to get that all worked out and situated, but in the end he was able to get back going. So the 3 McLaren cars, 3 of the 4 McLaren cars finished in the top 11. Rasmussen was a revelation during the whole month for Carpenter. You had the 3 Ray Hall cars. They're sandwiched. Stingray Robb had Carpenter, Kyle Larson, Roman Grosjean, Helio Castro-Neves, Kiffin Simpson, the cars that were on the lead lap. The only car that finished the lap down was Agustin Canapino. But it was a day where, the main storyline is Josef Newgarden becoming a repeat winner of the Indianapolis 500 after what has been a tumultuous start to the 2024 season, largely to do with Penske Racing and their misdeeds. But in a span of a couple of races, you had Scott McLaughlin go out there, dominate at Barber, and basically reestablish himself in the championship mix. And now Josef Newgarden goes and has a highlight for his life. They'll keep on replaying this for the rest of time. His move that he made on Pato Award in turn 3, and he is a repeat winner of the Indianapolis 500. Only been done, 5 other times prior to this. Wins a cool $450,000 bonus or whatever the hell from Borg Warner. Doesn't pour milk on himself, which shows he's a robot. Because everybody's been pouring milk on themselves for God knows how many decades for whatever reason, which is ridiculous. Penske gets his 20th Indy 500 win since he really needed another one. But yeah, it was a couple of weeks for Penske. and they went out there in the end when it counted. And Josef Newgarden, who has over the years shown an ability to close on ovals, getting the job done when it counted with a move that will probably be part of his Hall of Fame video when he eventually gets in the Hall of Fame, because he earned that victory for sure, Josh.
That victory for sure. And you talk about Newgarden not pouring the milk on himself like most winners kind of traditionally do these days, but it's definitely a long away from the milk commercial that he was in several years ago, when they tried to market how much the milk meant, and it went really overboard there. So he's come a long way from that, certainly. But yeah, the last couple of laps there, they were trading the lead, trying to save fuel mileage. Newgarden had a vibration in his car that we thought might affect his handling and might affect his ability to hold on to the lead. But Pato O'Ward was seemingly looking like he was showing restraint, trying to hold on to until the last lap. But then he made the move to pass, coming to the white flag on the last lap there, and then coming onto the backstretch started weaving, which I think the weaving part, I think it got a little excessive there, and I wonder if he had done that a little bit less. Maybe he could have held on to the lead or had more momentum going into turn 3 than he had, because the scrubbing speed with weaving and all that definitely slows you down a little bit, especially with the amount that he did there, and he even dropped below the white line before the grass on the backstretch there. So that's part of it. I also kind of think his tires were wearing out, because he definitely didn't get a good run off of turn 2. I mean, of course, Josef Newgarden's in his wake there, but in his draft, but he definitely didn't get off on turn 2 as well as he could have to kind of build that gap on the backstretch. And then, of course, Newgarden got in front of him in the center of turn 3, and that took his air away, and he had the aero wash there. So didn't have enough time to recover from that, obviously, and comes home second. So consolation prize of about $1 million for Pato O'Ward there, compared to the winner. So he second in 2 out of the last 3 years. We were talking offline, of course, with Joe and everything, and talking about how maybe he's going to be the Earnhardt of Indy 500s, or the Michael Andretti. And I mean, let's not go that far yet, but he's definitely on his way. I mean, I think there's a reason why Tony Kanaan. I mean, he had 2 drivers to console. He had to console Kyle Larson and Pato O'Ward there, and of course, Kanaan had his own share of misfortunes leading up to his win in 2013. So I think maybe that's a similar comparison there with Pato O'Ward, and his so far misfortunes in the Indy 500. But I mean, yeah, like I said earlier, I mean, it was an incredible race to watch. I mean, the first half of the race, filled with carnage and lots of incidents, which I think that's partly because they'd wait 3.5 hours, 4 hours for the race to start, and then also because they're starting at a different time than they were normally used to starting the race, of course, which the track conditions were a lot different, and changed the dynamic of the race there, because normally you expect it the mid-afternoon, daytime, hot, slick track, and after the rain, track cooled off, and it had a lot more grip than it normally would. So that led to the high number of lead changes and passing. So that was definitely a factor in the racing that we saw yesterday. So I mean, Newgarden, of course, recovers effectively from the penalty at the beginning of the year, or from the first race of the year. Now records his first win on paper, a second win on video, I guess, this year for him. So, you talk about his ability there as an oval racer. I mean, he's got oval racing down, and we're kind of seeing kind of a little bit of a mini rivalry between him and O'Ward on ovals, and we've seen Newgarden and O'Ward have kind of 1-2 finishes in the past on ovals, so this might be the start of something. And it's a shame that we don't go to an oval, the week immediately following the Indianapolis 500. Of course, it used to be Texas, and for as much as we get hate on Texas, it was actually not that bad of a race to follow up with the Indianapolis 500. To be fair, so we need an oval. To follow it, could be the Milwaukee Mile, which obviously is not that far away, but they're scheduling that for later in the year, for whatever reason. But it would be nice to follow up that. But so the finish was great. Obviously, Chevy domination there. But I think there are other players involved. Honda wise, Scott Dixon was up there in the mix despite not having a good qualifying day. Kyle Kirkwood was there up in the mix and was able to recover from his pit road penalty before halfway. And Colton Herta was there, and I think he was going to end up being the best Honda. Colton Herta would have been the best Honda if he didn't crash there. So the race, still finished under 3 hours. There's plenty of time to spare before the 8:15 curfew time that they had set up. So that was good, at least of the 3 races on the greatest day in motorsports. Is definitely one of the better races that we've seen, and certainly showcased why this race is one of the great races, not just a marquee race of the series like the Coke 600, but certainly one of the great races in all of motorsport. Along there, that's why it's the Triple Crown. Along with Le Mans. Monaco, of course, it's his own category and everything, and not really great racing there, but because of the history, it's obviously part of it. And that's why the 3 Triple Crown races are Monaco, Indianapolis, and Le Mans. So that what we saw yesterday, with the emotions from people who lost, and from Josef Newgarden, of course, celebrating in the grandstands once again, which I guess that's going to be his signature, like we had with Elio climbing the fence. I guess Newgarden climbing into the photography hole on the catch fence there. That's his signature Indianapolis 500 celebration there. So showed exactly what Indy means, to paraphrase what Al Unser said in 1992.
And it's funny, I was literally going to say it, like you talked about the emotions, and he was Al Unser Jr. in 1992 after the wreck in 89, racing for the lead with Emerson Fittipaldi, and going and saying to Jack Root, "You just don't know what Indy means," and going and trying to get a hold of his daughter Cody or whatever, I forget, her his son Al. You got an F-bomb out of Pato on national TV, which was great. That emotion, the fact they were willing to stay with the race and interview a lot of these players afterwards. You saw, I think there's a rivalry building as well amongst these Penske drivers and the McLaren drivers, because Alexander Rossi was just pissed off the whole entire time with Penske, and then Pato O'Ward seems to keep on getting humbled by Josef Newgarden, and he knows that if he's going to win a championship, he's going to have to run through Penske, and they're the 2 big Chevy teams, so I think they're going to butt heads. That's going to be a obvious point of contention as we go along. for until further notice. I mean, that was one piece. Alex Palou going and getting a top 5 finish, maintaining his points lead, gaining 19 points on, going from a 1-point lead to a 20-point lead in a day where basically he didn't have a car he had a car that was probably no better than a 5th place car, got a 5th place finish out of it. And that's how he's won 2 championships. So it's a problem for everybody that he didn't have a problem like a lot of Hondas did yesterday, including Colton Herta, who probably had the fastest car like Josh mentioned, but spins out and crashes, and for whatever reason gets out of his race car, and then they tow it back on a flatbed, lose I don't know how many laps. They lost in the end. He finished 30 laps down, and he probably, arguably, if there wasn't like super serious damage, maybe they might have had to realign the car. I know that he had front nose damage. You had Hinch and Townsend, when Townsend wasn't busy blowing Ferrucci and cleaning his loads off, going and talking about how he should have been back in that car. And you think about, for Colton Herta, he's battling for a championship in theory. Will that come back to haunt him later? We'll see. Things are relatively close in the points. I mean, when you look at Alex Palou, he's 50, basically 50 points ahead of him right now, 49, because of the finish. So that's a race, and you don't know if he stays on the lead lap. If he's able to, if it was just front wing damage and he stays around the lead lap, he probably flirts with going and being in the top 15 because he had a fast race car. And you think about how many points that would have been. But, I guess we'll find out what that means later on in the year. We talked about the Honda issues. There were mechanical issues. There was a wreck on lap 1. Tom Blomqvist, who has been great in sports cars in IMSA, comes from great stock. His dad is a legendary rally driver, but his IndyCar baptism has been a baptism by fire. It's not been very pretty, and he adds his name to to a list of people who have crashed on lap 1, turn 1 at Indianapolis. Took Marcus Ericsson out, and basically I think Marcus Ericsson's never going to not run a Ronnie Peterson helmet ever again at Indianapolis. That wasn't the reason why his month went to hell, but I know that it was probably a month that he wants to forget. Finishes dead last, loses a ton of points. Now he's 19th in points, basically has no chance at winning the championship, even if he really, if we really want to talk about him having a chance to win the championship, but loses a bunch of points there. Pietro Fittipaldi, I think, got bumped by someone there, and then he spun out, hit the wall. Marcus Armstrong had an engine issue along with Catherine Legg. Catherine Legg was doing a great job with promoting the Elf brand for makeup. I was telling that to the girl at the stretch lab or whatever, and telling her what it meant. I mean, trying to kind of talk about how much that activation and what they were doing, and how, you had Lindsay Zarniak going and freaking out about it on her Instagram, basically, and doing a bit for them too. I mean, Catherine Legg's one of the last female drivers that are out there that are really making this push, bringing in new sponsors, and they're trying to do it the right way. They're not Miss Hummer. They're not a a absolute whack job whore who couldn't drive a race car and stuff like that. Catherine Legg is a winner. She won in Toyota Atlantics. She's had time over the years in full-time equipment. Of course, it hasn't went to ideal scenario, but obviously people want to support her. And so it's unfortunate for her that she wasn't able to go very far yesterday. Only went 20-something laps. Linus Lundqvist hit the fence. It was a really rough month for him, for a guy who, like Christian Rasmussen, an Indy Lights champion, two guys that are probably going to be factors in this race. But Linus Lundqvist had a really brutal time figuring it out. Another Scandinavian, Felix Rosenqvist, a guy who has been a revelation for Honda teams and Meyer Shank Racing, blew up 55 laps into the race, and you wonder, their team with Elio, they were running up in the top 10. Rosenqvist was running up there with Colton Herta. So would Rosenqvist have been up there late in the race as well? Would that have made a difference there? Power ends up crashing, but he was a non-factor the whole day, and mentioned Herta. And Marco Andretti, shows up. He shows up and qualifies, and then promptly shows why he's a one-off driver these days. So, but he's friends with Tony Stewart, and he's got a lot of money, and he's got all kinds of fancy things. So, and he won an SRX championship, and the SRX doesn't exist anymore. So, good on you, Marco. Yeah, I mean, I think that Honda, the struggles they had is a huge storyline. You wonder how they recover going into Detroit now that we're a few races away from them bringing in the hybrid systems into the championship. So you have to add that into the mix after what transpired with Penske and the cheating scandal and all these things. Now you're going to add that element into it. Every oval race they have the rest of the year will have that hybrid element as a part of it too. So those are things we're going to have to look at as we go along. So I mean, Palou, the leader with 183 points. His teammate Scott Dixon in second. Third is Will Power. Fourth, O'Ward. Fifth, Colton Herta. Sixth, Scott McLaughlin. Seventh, Joseph Newgarden. Eighth, Alexander Rossi. Ninth is Felix Rosenqvist, and Kyle Kirkwood rounds out the top 10 heading to Detroit. So that's that for the Indianapolis 500. We'll move forward to the Coca-Cola 373.5, which was supposed to be the Coca-Cola 600.
It's the 600K.
Yeah, that's essentially what it was. Yeah, it was a 600K because ran because it was 500K is 312 miles, since that's what they do at Phoenix. So I mean, in this deal, you had only the two stages. They didn't get to stage 3, and of course, but it was a pretty active race. It had 21 lead changes. You had a lot going on in the field itself, but in the grand scheme, it was a Toyota. It was a Toyota and Hendrick benefit, which, I mean, we could just rewind, I don't know how many episodes of this show talking about the Cup Series for the last couple of years, and for the last 5 years, and that's basically what the series is. Christopher Bell, who's had some bad luck, but has a win, ends up going and getting the victory, winning a stage in the process. Brad Keselowski had a terrible qualifying run. On Saturday, had to come from tailback, basically. But in the end, finishes second, trying to get 2 wins in a row after having the long losing streak. Keeping the momentum going for the Roush, the RFK group. William Byron, who started on the front row, it sounds like for the 5th time he's been started on the front row in the 600, won a stage. Tyler Reddick, who got penalized to the point where he had to do a pass-through penalty with infractions in technical inspection, comes back to finish 4th. Dennis Hamlin 5th. Keebler Gibbs qualified on his first career pole, led the second most laps, finished 6th. William Clyde Elliott the 2nd, 7th. Chastain, Bowman, and Josh Berry finished top 10. Probably had a little better car than that, but ends up finishing 10th. With all the rumors and likely scenarios of SHR closing, you wonder what will happen with the likes of Josh Berry and Rodney Childers and that whole entire group, that Kevin Harvick group that has been there for more than a decade, or for a decade there at Stewart-Haas Racing. What happens with them, with the machinations going on there. I think with Front Row basically taking their spot as a Tier 1 team, I wonder if Front Row Motorsports goes and essentially gets a charter and brings them all over, and maybe brings another driver over, perhaps. That might be the move, but we'll see what happens with that. Bubba Wallace just outside the top 10 in 11th. Martin Truex Jr. had a fast race car, didn't get back up there. The pits sequences didn't work out so well for him from what they were saying on TV. And Justin Allgaier, who ended up subbing for Kyle Larson in the 5 car, finished 13th, which when you consider Justin Allgaier's Cup career, that's probably one of his better finishes. He was a lap down. He was struggling early in the race. He somehow or another got back on the lead lap the hard way, old school way, and from there on basically battled back up to where he was 13th and in a position to give Kyle Larson a car that could have won the 600, even though he wouldn't have gotten credit for it. He would have Eric Almirola. He would have had the Eric Almirola victory like Denny Hamlin got at Milwaukee years ago, since we made the Milwaukee reference. Josh did, of course, thinking about the fact that IndyCar used to have Milwaukee the week after Indy for God knows how many decades. And then they had the Xfinity Series races there in July. So now they're going to do it in August, but that's beside the point. Allgaier would have gotten the credit for it if Larson had been able to get in the car. He had 35 of the race's 40 starters on the lead lap. The defending race winner, Ryan Blaney, hit the fence in lap 143 and wasn't able to finish. Noah Gragson, who started 19th and had a fast car, got hooked by Richard, who's I guess he thought he was driving around Kyle Busch, but instead he would go against Kyle Busch Jr. and wreck him for whatever reason. So Gragson loses out on some points there. You look back at some of these other people. LaJoy, I think, had some issues at one point. Harrison Burton, I mean, it's every week with Harrison Burton. He sucks. Go through some of these other guys. I mean, SVG started 36th. He finished 28th, just ahead of Jimmy Johnson. So that's a win. Daniel Suarez was running up around the top 10 and fell back, along with Chris Buescher was up. He came from the back. He wrecked his car in practice. was able to come back, was running in the top 10 with Brad Keselowski, and then the sequences didn't work out in his favor. I don't know what happened to Chase Briscoe. For most of the day, he was running in the top half of the field and then ends up running next to Ryan Preece, who basically was honest and said Stewart-Haas Racing has no support because they're a Tier 2 organization now, which would explain why they suck out loud. Because they're basically what Front Row Motorsports has been for God knows how many decades. And probably why Gene Haas doesn't give a shit, which, I mean, to be fair, Gene Haas doesn't give a shit about any racing entity. He's willing to rinse money away in Formula One, which we'll get into in a minute. And then you have Tony Stewart, who drives Dodges and is supported by Dodge and NHRA, and probably part of the problem there. Went through a whole lot over there, but in the end, like I mentioned, Toyota and Chevy dominated. You look at the top 6. 4 of the top 6 were Toyotas. You add 6 of the top 12. So, I mean, it was basically a Joe Gibbs Racing and a Hendrick Motorsports benefit at Charlotte. I mean, the bigger, I guess, as big of a story was the decision that was made to call the race, how long it took to get to the point of calling the race. But Christopher Bell, who's not had much going right for him for the last 2 months, gets a win in a major here, was in the right place at the right time, and maybe switches that momentum back around into a good way to get into this summer part of the season, towards the end of the faux part of the TV package, thankfully, and into the NBC part of the season, into some racetracks where he's done really well, like Iowa, Nashville, and others. But Christopher Bell gives himself a cushion now with a second win, and he's been a factor in the championship in the last 8 for the last few years. We can't. I don't think it's. I don't think we can say that he's a absolute contender, but we can't forget about Christopher Bell by any means. And yesterday was proof of that, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Christopher Bell, I mean, he obviously rain shortened race there, but I mean, he raced his way to the win before that. I mean, he was in front, so obviously they were racing to the rain, of course, and he was up front when it counted, and made the moves to stay up front, obviously, and get that win. So, I mean, yeah, hasn't had a good last couple of months, but has already had a race win. So now he gets a little bit of extra cushion. So more than likely, probably makes the playoffs. So he'll be in contention for the championship, of course, and hopefully for him has more consistency to try to get, now that the door is kind of open because Larson effectively skipped the race here. He opens the door to, can he make up points, make up ground to possibly get a regular season title? I mean, he's 100 points back, 105 points back, so he's still a long ways to go there. But, could he get more consistency and stack up wins in the so-called regular season and go on, to contend? So we'll have to see. But yeah, a lot happened in this race, of course. Keselowski came from the back and was able to finish second. William Byron made a really great pass in the turf coming off of turn 4, which that was probably the highlight move of this race. Tyler Reddick came from the back to finish in 4th. Denny got another top 5, and his streak of leading races, 17 race streak of leading races for Denny Hamlin, comes to an end. So first race that he did not lead a lap in, although he still got a top 5. Ty Gibbs, of course, ran up front, had the pole and everything. So, yeah, the uh, another race where he runs up front, and eventually I think Ty Gibbs will eventually get into victory lane. Of course, if this one had gone to completion, perhaps maybe it could have been Ty Gibbs that was the winner at the end if they had gone to the full distance. But I mean, the stuff that happened, with the rain, of course, from what I could gather looking online, it seems like this was a TV decision to end the race, uh, before they could have resumed, because it seemed like they were very close to getting drivers to uh, come back and get in the cars and go back to green, but then they abruptly called the winner, and it seemed like they were not happy with um, the humidity and the moisture in the track. But I mean, from all we can tell from online, it seems like a good portion of the track was mostly dry or getting dry. So I feel like fans were robbed of being there. Of course, all the effort. I mean, not only that, but it seemed like the parking and stuff was a disaster. Compared to previous years and stuff. So a lot of logistics messed up, and of course, and amongst other things. So um, yeah, the decision there. I mean, from what I can gather, it seemed like from Joe Gibbs, it seemed like they were 15 minutes away from calling drivers when they got like before they called the race or something. I heard another tweet that apparently they had announced on, I guess they had announced that the race had been called, and Chris Bell didn't even find out until he was interviewed, which that makes sense and stuff. So yeah, that's a very abrupt decision there, and from all I can gather, it seems like Fox was probably the one that kind of spearheaded that decision for whatever reason, which is stupid, because you go back to last year, the Coke 600 was and the Xfinity race were both delayed, and they ran the Xfinity. I mean, granted, it was on FS1 or whatever it was, but they ran the Xfinity race well late. I mean, I remember we live casted watching that, at the end of that race there. I remember that. So obviously they've stayed late before, and obviously they're in their hometown. Of course, there's no reason to go out and not finish the race. So yeah, I mean, I don't really understand that one. And if anything, it shows that Fox doesn't deserve to cover the sport anymore, because you contrast the coverage of this race and any cup race or Xfinity race, truck race in general, and compare it to what NBC does, not only for NASCAR, but what we saw yesterday for IndyCar, what we see when they cover IMSA. Of course, I mean, there's things we can criticize NBC for when they do cover the sport, but I mean, there's a reason why they do a lot better job covering, and Fox makes it look like a cartoon. And obviously have the comic book representation of the drivers and stuff, which is very humorous to look at, and shows that they're not really serious about covering NASCAR, which is a shame, because I think Mike Joy is still a good broadcaster, still has a lot of history and stuff. Kevin Harvick is pretty good. Bob Pockrass is a really good journalist as well. So yeah, it's unfortunate that it seems like that they're the ones that spearheaded that decision to try to end the race and everything, of course, and cost, of course, the opportunity to save Larson, even though he wasn't going to get credit for being in the race. Could he still come back and give Justin Allgaier his one career victory in the Cup Series? So that robs the fans of that opportunity, of course, and robs a lot of fans. And hopefully with Amazon coming, hopefully we don't have this type of coverage anymore, and hopefully if they have a situation like this, Amazon be willing to wait it out, because they don't have, there's no deadline to get off the air for other programming with Amazon. They can pretty much stay on as long as they need to, of course. So we'll see how that goes when next year when we get to that. But I mean, obviously with Larson, it's a big story there too. I mean, we have to touch on the fact that there's the debate about whether he should get a waiver for skipping, effectively being forced Well, I mean, he had made a decision to choose to whether to continue in the Indianapolis 500 and or go to Charlotte. And I mean, we talked about it, earlier. The Indianapolis 500 is the one of the greatest races in the world, and um, obviously the opportunity to compete in that, given all the time and money and effort that Larson put into it. I mean, I think he made the right decision, and I think NASCAR. I mean, they're gonna have to give in a waiver. I mean, Rick Hendrick will not be happy if they don't, which shows the influence he has. But still, I mean, with the way that they hand these things out, I mean, why deny Larson a waiver and everything? And if anything, it just shows that how much of a sham the playoff format is and all that. So, just continues to make them look bad in terms of credibility wise. But I mean, Larson not only did publicity for IndyCar for showing a NASCAR driver drawing in more interest into the Indy 500, but also representing NASCAR over there. So he, um, being penalized for that, shouldn't be penalized for that, in my opinion. So, hopefully next year he has the opportunity to do this again. And that's the other part of it, is if he does do this again, it's valuable experience to get this out of the way. We saw that he could drive the car at Indianapolis, but the nuances of racing in IndyCar for Larson, we saw that in the race with the upshift mistake that he made on one of the restarts, and the pit road penalty that he had late in the going there, and the overtaking and understanding how to pass and stuff. But he skipped the Indianapolis 500 because of the weather and decided to keep going to maintain, not have to, take the waiver and maintain his points lead and all that in NASCAR. Well, if he decided to do this again next year or whenever, we wouldn't have that experience, and we would effectively be watching his rookie debut in the future or whenever. So, and this opportunity may not come again because it's been said that there is an option for him, or that this is a 2-year deal, but it seems like it's more, from what I can gather, it's more of an option. And so I think he wants to. It's just a matter of making sure that they have all the logistics and the sponsorship lined up and all that, which, I mean, obviously probably going to be sponsored by HendrickCars.com again. But I think just all the things that went into enabling him to do this year. Could they get all that together to be able to do it again next year or whenever? So yeah, I mean, I hope he is able to do it again. So because I think we're kind of robbed of the fact that the ability to see a guy who could legitimately contend in both events and fail to do that. I mean, it's kind of disappointing to see. But that's kind of how this weekend kind of went. Is there's even though we saw one great race, there was a lot of other storylines that we weren't able to see kind of play out, and forced to see how it ended in kind of the worst possible way.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the one angle with Larson, like you talked about, and getting robbed of that. You got the fan aspect of people on a long weekend. You see and read about or hear about all the nightmares of weather and traffic that are going on today because of the travel. More people traveling than ever before, supposedly on a Memorial Day weekend. And you think about that was a pretty good crowd at Charlotte, even with the the circus sideshow that was going on. The fact is, you got screwed when you had a pretty good product going on there. You had all three manufacturers having a chance. Cars that when you talk about this package, these are the tracks. This is the kind of track that actually is the best for this car. It's a major. You want to win this race. Yes, it's ended in rain shortened fashion before, but to call it the way they did, when they did, stinks to, it stinks and it basically speaks to TV, which to me, when you consider you have FS1, you have other Fox entities that you could put the race on, you could put it on the streaming platform if you're really worried about it. A lot of people are able to access that. It's pretty weak, and it's no offense to Christopher Bell. He's not the first person that's won a range shortened race. He won't be the last. He's not the first person to win the 600 in a range shortened manner, like Daytona, like Mikey won his second 500 that way. There's been other ones. But you look at, it's a great race. It's a big race. You want to run it to the conclusion, or at least get close to it. At least make an effort to get through the first three stages, get to that final stage. Something comes up, you have electricity in the air, okay, fine. Because then you're going to have this 30-minute clock. Now, that if there was no electricity in the area, they could have put it out. They could have raced, personally. I heard or read a thing about weepers, which it's an SMI track. Why wouldn't there be weepers? They can resurface a track and make it seem like it's old, like North Wilkesboro, but then they make racetracks that have issues with weepers, like Charlotte in Texas. It's amazing to me, the amount of money the Smith family has, and they can't even fucking pave racetracks properly half the time. But in the end, I think we got robbed of a good finish. It probably would have been a Toyota anyway, whether it was Chris Bell or Keebler Gibbs, or I think it would have been a Toyota more than likely that won the race. But we lost out on some of them Fords having an opportunity outside of Brad Keselowski. We lost out on seeing maybe some other Chevy that wasn't a Hendrick Chevy possibly having a chance to. The Larson piece was probably the biggest one, because Tony Stewart will continue at least for one more year as the most successful attempt at the double, finishing sixth at the Indianapolis 500 and third in the Coca-Cola 600 after starting tailback in the 600. In 1999, that was the second best, where he finished a lap down in the Indy 500 and ninth, and then finished fourth in the Coca-Cola 600, falling out of his seat. Now you consider how efficient everything is with the air travel too, the health aspect of it. Kyle Larson is primed. He can do this, and it's unfortunate we didn't get to see that, come to pass in its full form. Robbie Gordon had similar issues, I think, in 2002. Both in 2000 and 2002, he had issues with it. When he tried to attempt the double, he ran for his own team in the year 2000 in Cup, so it didn't really matter as much. But he ran for a good car. I think in 2002 he ran for RCR in the 31 car, and RCR was involved in the IndyCar deal as well. In 2003 he was subbing for Dario in the 27 car at Andretti, and I think he was still a part of Richard Childress Racing at that point. Yeah, so he was subbing and so he had a legitimate shot, but didn't come off. So, it's happened before. It's just a lot more box office because it's Kyle Larson, because it's Hendrick, Gordon, you got McLaren, etc., etc. But with Larson basically missing a race, he's made the regular season championship interesting again. Because Denny Hamlin takes the points lead by 5 over Martin Truex and 6 over Kyle Larson. Just for that alone, they should give him a waiver because the regular season title was going to be his anyways. So he's basically spotted him a race. Like Kyle Busch did it when he broke his leg. And whether he had a cheated up car during the playoffs or not, or whatever it was, his first championship, he spotted him 13 races essentially, and they gave him a waiver. He won a race, got into whatever points, and then went out and won a championship. This is proof positive of how NASCAR like, oh, you need to show up every week and this and the other thing. Well, Kyle Larson said, I don't have to even show up for a race. I'm not going to really lose anything. And he really didn't. And he could still go out there and win a regular season championship. And that to me would be hilarious, because if you miss a whole entire race and you beat people who are at every single race, kind of tells you that the point system is not good. But, you know, whatever. Or maybe it proves that it maximizes your great results, and even if you don't exist in other races, doesn't really matter. In terms of, like I mentioned, Hamlin, points leader by 5 over Martin Truex Jr. and 6 over Kyle Larson. 17 points. He leads by 17 over Chase Elliott, 31 points to William Byron. So you have 3 Hendrick cars, 2 Gibbs cars in the top 5. Then you have Tyler Reddick and Ty Gibbs very close together. So then there's 4 Toyotas and 3 Hendrick cars. And then you have Alex Bowman. So all 4 Hendrick cars and 4 Toyotas in the top 8. So it's pretty interesting how that all works out. Christopher Bell in 11th. You got, I think Buscher's a cut. Kyle Busch is a cutoff, or Buscher's a cutoff. Yeah, Buscher's a cutoff right now by 11 over Chase Briscoe and 30 over Joey Logano. Josh Berry's had the momentum, good momentum, but right now he is 53. He's 80, basically 83 points. 80 plus points behind Buescher right now, so he's going to need help as we go through the rest of this regular season. Pointing his way in is going to be very difficult. I think if you're anybody behind Chris Buescher at this point, I think you're going to have to win. Daniel Suarez has been absolute trash outside of his Atlanta win. He really hasn't run all that well. Backdooring that Atlanta victory is basically going to save his career. And, he's going to make the playoffs, but he's not been that good. So it's interesting how that all works out. Okay. Let's move forward to Xfinity. So William Clyde Elliott II gets the victory. Second win for the 17 car. The junior motorsports guys end up getting some good results. You had Buckshot Jones getting his best finish of the season. So is Sammy Smith in second and third, respectively. Sam Mayer finished fourth, led 44 laps. The most laps in the race. Kyle Busch finished sixth, just behind AJ Allmendinger, who I think was involved in one of the incidents. He got into it with Riley Herbst, and but still came back to finish fifth. Kyle Busch sixth, Ryan Sieg, Josh Williams from 36th, Keebler Gibbs, and Noah Gragson rounding out the top 10. You had 18 cars on the lead lap. Chandler Smith, the last car on the lead lap. Justin Allgaier got into a wreck with the 20 car there, which is, Keebler Gibbs. The 17, which is William Clyde Elliott II and Ryan Ellis on the front stretch. I think it was on a restart, and that basically eliminated him right then and there, after he had won both stages. So unfortunate for him. Cole Custer got run over by Hank Hill. Hank Hill proving once again that he's an absolute piece of garbage. He has, he races for the right team, I gotta say. If you're gonna race for a team and be that big of a douche and be that big of a piece of shit, I think RCR is great in employing inbreds and hacks and never will be's. And Austin Hill is all of that. And he can go and eat a bag of dicks. That freaking goofball that he is, who rages about how everybody races him, yet he races like a jackass. I forget who, somebody on YouTube basically called him the Sean Higurani of the Xfinity series, or Connor Jones of the Xfinity series, which is pretty hilarious and pretty strong, considering both of those idiots run over everybody in late models and then can't deal with it if somebody races them hard. So that's what Austin Hill is, except he's 30 years old and he's a big goofball with 3 kids, and he has no neck and he's got a big head and he's just a giant piece of shit. But yeah, that was, when you're running over the defending series champion, losing your mind, and you're supposed to be somebody who might be a person who could be a cup contender or somebody to get in a cup ride, it's pretty pathetic. But then that's RCR for you. So a lot of guys who are contenders for the points had issues. I mentioned Custer, Allgaier, Creed had a oil cooler issue. Kligerman wrecked. Herbst, I mentioned earlier, had a wreck. Jesse Love finished 2 laps down in 28th. So those are a lot of the guys that are in the points. But in the end, it was essentially a cup benefit. You had 4 cup guys in the top 10, and William Clyde Elliott goes out there, leads the last 18 laps of the race, passing Sam Mayer to go and get a second victory for Hendrick in the 17 car here in this season, Josh.
Yeah, Chase Elliott, of course, hasn't actually had too many wins in the Xfinity side overall in his career, but because obviously most of his wins came when he was full-time in the series, and so he only has 6 career wins now in Xfinity, but he goes out and wins this race. Last 18 laps he led, of course, but there was still some entertaining aspects of this race. With Sam Mayer obviously led a ton of laps. Kyle Busch led a ton of laps. So did Ty Gibbs, and all 3 of those guys ran up front at different points of the race, and we saw great battles between Kyle Busch and Sam Mayer doing a slide job in the middle of turn 1 and 2 on the back, coming onto the backstretch at one point. So great racing between the leaders there in Xfinity, and seeing how that played out with the lead changes that we had in this race. So there was fairly competitive for the Xfinity series, and it shows I think why the Xfinity series has better racing overall than Cup. But this is one of the tracks where the Cup car has better racing, but even the Xfinity race, we saw how 3 guys, multiple cars could challenge for the lead there. So a lot of great racing, of course, but I think the one that you mentioned there with Austin Hill, have to wait and see if they announce a penalty of some kind. I think it's worth it to try to penalize him after pushing a guy and dumping him after they've already crashed on the backstretch there. So that's worth the penalty to me. And Obviously, Cole Custer not happy about that. And you call them Hank Hill or whatever. I mean, I look at him as the bacon is good for me kid from Wife Swap, certified YouTube classic there. So that's how I view him. But yeah, I mean, he's just not a likable guy and continues to make enemies and um, everything. And I mean, dare I say, we make a diss track like Kendrick Lamar and Drake there, and referencing his family. And saying, I'm sorry, well, I'm not going to go there, but if anybody listen to that song, Meet the Grams, it's a great one there for a diss track if you want to start off with a diss track on Austin Hill there. But no, it's um just an unlikable guy there in the Xfinity series, Austin Hill. But at least he can drive on a super speedway and everything, because that's about the only place that he goes out and wins, and plus the Atlanta track as well. But yeah, I mean, Cup benefit overall in this one. But still, some of the regulars having good runs like Sam Mayer and Brandon Jones. So yeah, like you said, the junior motorsports guys actually, for once, had a good result. Justin Allgaier was leading laps as well, but then ended up hitting the wall late, which kind of set up that final caution for Chase Elliott to come out and have a chance to win, and the final incident as well with Austin Hill and Cole Custer there. So yeah, I mean, overall, yeah, I mean, Cup, yeah, great Xfinity race here at Charlotte overall, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they continue to put on the best product of all three major NASCAR series, and it's a shame that Cup has got a GT3 car as their platform instead of this, even though, because of it's got, the connections with Mike Helton and his company that he has building composite body panels. But and essentially, I mean, you still have motor programs and stuff going on in Xfinity, but it is harder. You take the good with the bad, and the fact is the Xfinity product is the best product out there of the three major series. Right now, the points in Xfinity very close to in the cut line situation. I mean, you have Riley Herbst only plus 49 to the cut, Sheldon Creed plus 24, Kligerman plus 18, Buckshot Jones plus 15, and Anthony Alfredo plus 2, Sammy Smith minus 2, Ryan Sieg minus 6, and Shane Van Gisbergen minus 34. You add AJ Allmendinger, he's only plus 58, and the Kaulig team has been basically god awful in general, in whatever they're involved in. Cup 2, and also in Xfinity. Austin Hill has a 4-point lead on Chandler Smith, 21 on Cole Custer, and that's interesting how he ran him over. It cost him a bunch of points there. Allgaier minus 57, Jesse Love minus 70, rounding out the top 5. Then 37-point gap between Love and Allmendinger. Allmendinger, Herbst in a little pod by themselves. Creed, Kligerman, Jones in 1. And then we have that group from Sam Mayer. Sam Mayer has a win. From Sam Mayer all the way to Ryan Sieg is only separated by 9 points. So that counts 4 drivers there. 2 that are in just outside the cut line, and 2 that are in. So that's interesting there. I mean, what's really something is Eric Almirola's only run 5 races. He's only 90 points out of the cut line. So kind of tells you what the bottom end of the playoff is like for the Xfinity series. It's no offense to Anthony Alfredo, but I guess it shows what Eric Almirola is able to do in that 20 car. Read and rumor that he might be taking over the 19 car next year, which would be nauseating, to say the least, after basically being an also-ran and irrelevant in Cup for essentially his entire career. And then he gets one of the best rides in the sport for that, because he loves Jesus. So I guess that's what the whole thing is. I guess he does the prayer services with the Reverend Gibbs, and that makes him a better race car driver. I don't know, but the Truck Series, you mentioned that Corey Heim dominated the race, and he probably would have won the race, but Nick Sanchez was in the right place at the right time. Pretty cool to see, because it was Chris Showalter going and making a historic start for 700 truck races, and he's been at every single one of them. He's a truck chief for the Rev Racing group there, the number 2, and Nick Sanchez is able to win part of that trip, the first leg of the Triple Truck Challenge. He goes and gets that win, leads 9 laps, and so that was good there. I think I'm not sure if Corey Heim had won both stages. So Corey dropped in running order, sweeping the opening. Yeah. Issues on pair dropped. That's what's up. Led to a disqualification. He had 3 lugs loose. So that is a no-no, especially when you consider their whole thing with keeping wheels on the vehicles. When you consider Corey Heim has a huge points lead, and he won 3 races, it doesn't really mean much of anything. It's just unfortunate for the 11 team and Tricon giving away an opportunity to win a race there, but the beneficiary was Nick Sanchez. So Nick Sanchez over Stuball, Grant Enfinger, Matt Mills getting a top 5 finish. Christ. Ben Rhodes, Jake Garcia, Caden Honeycutt, so giving 2 Nice trucks in the top 7. Connor Mozak for Spire, which is part of, that's also Nick Sanchez. Grant Enfinger has a connection to the Spire group, I believe. Dean Thompson for Tricon, or it's either he has he's with McAnally, I think, and then Christian Eckes, who started tailback, finished 10th, led 37 laps in the race. So I mean, it was Taylor Gray after winning, or Tanner Gray after winning his first ARCA race, actually won a stage, finished second in the first stage. Doesn't get the finish that he wanted, but Corey Heim continues to dominate. They had to make a pretty fundamental mistake to go and get DQ'd, but he was the fastest truck. He had won both stages. He was probably on his way to a 4th win, but I'm sure Nick Sanchez doesn't really care about that, or Rev Racing, or Spire Rev Racing. They get the victory, and now they're solidly in the playoff with, I think, 5 races to go in the regular season, Josh.
5 races remaining, I think, in the Truck Series, still called regular season there. And obviously, Nick Sanchez, I did not think he would win this race. I thought Corey Heim, with the tires that he had and the pace that he had, I thought he would be able to kind of knife through the field there at the end and get back into the lead. He had an issue on pit road that kind of set him back a little bit, but I thought he had enough pace to kind of go through there, and he looked like he was going to, but Sanchez was able to kind of aero block there on the last handful of laps and kind of wear out Corey Haim's tires there and in trying to get up there and pass Sanchez. So Sanchez, good racecraft there to be able to hold on to that win. I think that was very very respectable defense for the lead there and keeping probably the best driver in the Truck Series right now, keeping him from a win. Although even so, it wouldn't have counted because Corey Haim's lug nuts on one of the wheels, 3 lug nuts not safe and secure, and that resulted in the disqualification there. So, obviously that was part of the issues there. I think because they didn't get all 5 lug nuts. There was I think one that wasn't secured on there, and then I think the other. I guess they found 3 other lug nuts that were not fully tightened on there. So, DQ there for him. So I don't think that's going to hurt Corey Haim overall in the points. Unfortunate there because he did win both stages, so obviously doesn't get the benefit from that. But I think he'll recover from that, but it won't hurt him too much in the point standings. And he does lose in the point standings here to Christian Eckes, now 30 points behind, but there's still plenty of time to recover from that, especially with there's only 5 races, but given that if we think he is the best driver in this series right now, or one of the best cars, then perhaps he can go out and try to win some of these races here coming up and give himself a better cushion here for the playoff there. So bit of a bump in the road there for him probably overall, but I think Nick Sanchez winning, crazy that his crew chief has been there for literally all the Truck Series races, and that's pretty cool that he actually got to be in victory lane for his 700th start as a crew chief.
Yeah, Chris Showalter, the car chief, goes, and it was his 51st birthday too. I think they also mentioned. So great night and weekend for him. And for that team getting that win. They're 50 points out overall in the regular season championship. That win gets them in the mix playoff points wise. You have Eckes, Haim, Sanchez, Ty Majeski. That's really your those are the 4 contenders right now for the championship. I don't really see anybody outside of those 4 going out there and winning the championship. You have, Enfinger, Ben Rhodes is the last driver. It's a close battle. It's only a couple of points between Tanner Gray, Grant Enfinger, and Ben Rhodes. 2 points separating all 3 of them. Then you have Stu Ball minus 32, Matt Crafton minus 33, and Daniel Dye minus 34. But you have some interesting races that are coming along here. Not that many races left. Of course, they'll run Gateway right in the heart of the afternoon on Saturday. After the Gateway race, they will have 3 weeks off before they race at Nashville. A week off, then 2 races back to back. Friday afternoon race for whatever reason at Pocono. Then a Friday night race at Indianapolis Raceway Park. 2 more weeks off, and then Richmond in August to end their regular season. After, I think that's part of the Olympic break there, or after the Olympic break. So, so it's the weird schedule. There's a lot of this really starts the choppy portion of the season after this coming weekend at Gateway, where basically you're going to forget that the Truck Series exists. So good on NASCAR with that. Speaking of choppy and generally forgettable, the Monaco Grand Prix can fit that bill. It was not interesting whatsoever. I mean, I'll say that I was watching the kids broadcast on ESPN2, so similar to when I watched the Super Bowl, because I didn't want to watch the main one. The announcing was actually engaging. They're keeping things going. The Nintendo Wii like emoticon faces and bodies and stuff, like you were talking about the cartoon characters that Fox has, but like they were going full force with like these video game characters and seeing all their faces. And you had Carlos Sainz dancing to Smooth Operator, I think, and then you had Charles Leclerc randomly popping into the pictures, and you had some of the other goofy stuff going on. They had good graphics. I actually was very engaged. I didn't care what the race sucked. Like, that's the first time I think I've watched a Monaco Grand Prix and not been bored. And you have to give them credit for that. The race in the end wasn't all that interesting. You only had 7 cars on the lead lap. Fernando Alonso finished just outside the top 10, and he was 2 laps down. So, it's pretty crazy. Charles Leclerc has had plenty of bad luck at Monaco. Is qualified on pole and crashed. He's fallen out of races, but in this case, he qualifies on pole on Saturday and then makes 2 starts, both of them good, and had a battle with Oscar Piastri for a good amount of the race, but holds him off and gets his first win at home at the Monaco Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri finishes second, Carlos Sainz third, Lando Norris fourth, George Russell rounds out the top 5. They all, of course, like Josh mentioned, were finished in the exact positions that they started. The top 10 was all the same. Fish lips, Lewis Hamilton, the last 2 cars on the lead lap. Then you had Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, and Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10. So the main information, I think their last pit stop, there was only the vast majority of the field outside of Fish Lips and Lewis were the only 2 drivers in the top 12 that pitted again after the safety, the intervention that took place once the Sergio Perez and the 2 Haas cars wrecked to start the race. I know it's Monaco, and I know that it's generally known as not a great race. These cars are way too wide. There's a lot to be left to be desired there. It's hard to take much away from it. This race, other than Ferrari, is actually goes into gets themselves into the mix for the constructors now, because they're 24 points out in the constructors championship. Drivers points wise, Verstappen is 31 points ahead of Leclerc, so it's really not a real situation unless he was able to make another big cut into the points. But Leclerc goes out there. He's been relatively consistent, but he gets the win that he's always wanted, Josh, at home at Monaco.
Charles Leclerc finally gets, or Chuck Leclerc, as Willie T. Ribbs would say. Finally gets his Monaco win, which, I mean, the last couple of years, he's been trying so hard to win. Of course, we remember in 2021 where he was on the pole, but then the misfortune they had before the race and unable to even participate in that. That's, quite a wild result there. But now here wins the pole in Monaco, so gave him a great opportunity to win, and all he had to do is just have a great start there. So obviously he kept the lead and continued on from there. And then, of course, the first lap caution or yellow for Sergio Perez and the Haas cars getting into it, and a big accident for Sergio Perez there, but gave kind of changed the complexion of the race from a strategy standpoint, and that kind of that led to them basically having no real pit strategy or anything like that, and question if we should allow pit tire changes under red flag, which obviously in other series we don't see that, but I guess in F1 that's okay. And kind of led to the starting order remaining the same, of course, but which I don't think we've ever really seen in F1 before. But this I mean, the race itself, I mean, outside of the first lap, I mean, it's typical Monaco, and like you said, the cars, I mean, not only are they too wide, but they're also too long. And I saw the comparison of the current F1 car versus 2008 and versus the 1980s McLaren from like 1988. Obviously, the old one was from 88 was very nimble, very shorter in terms of length, and could actually maneuver around Monaco, and perhaps you see a little bit of overtaking there. So Verstappen calling for circuit changes to Monaco to make it racing better. I don't know, maybe that's probably a lot easier to do than to go and change the car to make it fit Monaco. Although I feel like if you change the car, it probably would improve the racing at a lot of other F1 tracks, and especially on street circuits and all that. So compared to what we normally see, so that could be an option too. But that one's probably a lot harder given the amount of capital that they would take to make all the regulation changes and all that. So interesting though, the kids broadcast. I watched the regular broadcast, which is still pretty good. As a motorsports broadcast, but would have been interesting to watch the kids version, I guess, and see that. So interesting there for Leclerc, finally getting his win, which the first time in 93 years that we've seen somebody from Monaco actually win the Monaco Grand Prix. So kind of cool, because I think all the other drivers reside in Monaco, but or many of them do, but he's the one that's actually like from there and actually claims that is his a hometown, or I guess birthplace or whatever. So that's actually pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and for him, I mean, it means so much. It kind of is similar to win your home race, like especially in international motorsport, it definitely means a lot. But Monaco is just different that way, even though it's basically a procession. But the credit to Ferrari bringing a good car to Monaco, having a car that was capable of qualifying on pole, and Ferrari and Charles Leclerc not screwing it up, essentially. Credit to Piastri putting himself in position to possibly get the pole, possibly get his maiden Formula One win. But I think, we talk about Ty Gibbs. I think it's to a similar extent for Oscar Piastri. I think it's a matter of time before he goes out there and gets a win in Formula One, the way things are starting to kind of pan out. The points, like I mentioned, Verstappen is 31 points ahead of Leclerc. Leclerc's 25 points ahead of Lando Norris. Lando Norris is then 5 points ahead of Carlos Sainz and 6 ahead of Sergio Perez. Oscar Piastri in his own world in 6th, George Russell in 7th, Lewis Hamilton 12 points behind George Russell in 8th, Fred Alonso and Yuki Tsunoda rounding out the top 10. In the teams, there's only Sauber has not scored. Williams has moved up after their 9th place finish. They moved up to 8th in the constructors. Haas, even with the issues of yesterday, they're still 7th. As I mentioned, Ferrari is only 24 points behind Red Bull right now in the Constructors' Championship. McLaren basically on their own, along with Mercedes, Aston Martin. And Aston Martin has a 20-point lead on Red Bull, RB, Toro Rosso, blah, blah, blah. And then Haas, Williams, Alpine, and Slauber, who has not scored yet. They'll be back in Canada. We'll definitely preview it on next week's episode. Okay, so, talking about Monaco, we had the F2 and F3 at Monaco this past weekend. So we'll talk about that to start. Formula 2. Formula 2. We'll go with first Sebastian Philippe coming in ART. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot Sebastian Philippe owns ART now. But the winners at Monte Carlo, Taylor Barnard in the sprint race and Zach O'Sullivan in the feature race. They'll take a month off before their next race at Barcelona. Because Canada's in between that. In the sprint race, get back in there. The sprint race results: Taylor Barnard over Gabriel Bortoletto, Dennis Hauger rounding out the podium, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Franco Colapinto, Roman Stanek, Paul Aaron, Isaac Hadjar, Enzo Fittipaldi, and Zach O'Sullivan rounding out the top 10. I think the top 8 in the sprint score points, though. Correa and Crawford, 12th and 13th. Ollie Bierman in 11th. Ryumo Miyata, 17th. And Kushmaini not finishing. Then in the feature race, Zach O'Sullivan over Isaac Hadjar, Paul Aaron, Ollie Bierman, Juan Manuel Correa getting a 5th place finish, Dennis Hauger, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Gabriel Bortoletto, Victor Martins, and Zane Maloney rounding out the top 10. Barnard goes from winning to 11th, winning the sprint to 11th in the feature. Miney ends up 17th, Miata 15th. Issues for Jack Crawford there. So standings heading into Barcelona, and they'll have 3 races in a row: Barcelona, Austria, and Silverstone. Paul Aaron with a 2-point lead on Isaac Hadjar, 11 on Zane Maloney. Dennis Hauger is 24 points behind in 4th, and Gabriel Bortoletto is 30 points behind in 5th. Antonelli 6th. Zach O'Sullivan basically gives himself a restart in this championship with his feature win. He was basically in no man's land prior to that. Colapinto, Miney, who's went 3 consecutive races and 4 out of the last 5 with no points. He's only scored 1 point in the last 5 total races. Zane Maloney is on a similar streak, only 1 point in the last 3 and 7 in the last 4. So that's not in the bad stretch here, losing the points lead in the process. Enzo Fittipaldi finishing, or is in 10th. He's only had one really good weekend, and that was at Jeddah. Jack Crawford is tied for 10th with Enzo Fittipaldi. He scored. This is the first weekend where he didn't score points in one of the races. So that's that. Okay, so Formula 3, the results for the race at Monaco. Nicholas Soloff wins the sprint race, or Nicholas Soloff, and then Gabriele Mini in the feature. So we'll get the Soloff, Tim Tramnitz, Lawrence Van Hoopen, Leon Loke, Mari Boya, Daniel Beganovic, Luke Browning, Luca Fornaroli, and Oliver Goth. Round out the top 10. Gabriele Mini, who finished 11th. I think Max Easterson is the American driver. He finished 14th. Seb Montoya, 18th. Some different names we're seeing over there. The feature race, Gabriele Mini over Christian Mansell, Luke Browning, Arvin Lindblad, Luca Fornaroli, Beganovic, Boya, Tramnitz, Loke, and Goth. Round of the top 10. Montoya was 15th, Easterson 17th. And then Soloff goes from winning the sprint race to dead last of the classified drivers. So that's a pretty insane turnabout there. Trying to go and look through some of these drivers. I don't know if some of them have changed. Some of these, I mean, a lot of these names are just totally unfamiliar and complete, in some cases, completely irrelevant. So that's my reasoning for not knowing that. MotoGP getting into a heavy portion of their season. You got, is that Mark Marquez? That is something. So at Catalunya, Mark Marquez for the last podium spot. Okay. Pecco Bagnaia gets the victory over Jorge Martin by 1.74 seconds. Mark Marquez in a photo finish beats Alicia Spargaro for the last podium spot. Fabio Di Gianantonio, Raul Fernandez for Trackhouse in 6th. Alex Marquez, Brad Binder, Fabio Quartararo, and Miguel Oliveira giving Trackhouse both of their riders in the top 10. Marco Bezzecchi, Maverick Vinales, Pedro Acosta, who fell off while contending to possibly win, Taka Nakagami and Joanne Mir rounding out the points finishers. 2 of the KTMs fell out of Gustav Fernandez, Jack Miller, and then Frankie Morbidelli for Pramac. So that the points heading to Mugello is Jorge Martin has a 40 or 39 point lead over Pecco Bagnaia. Bagnaia and Mark Marquez are only separated by 2 points right now. Enea Bastianini is in 4th, Maverick Vinales 5th. It's a close battle, 11 points, Bastianini, Vinales, and Acosta. And Alicia Spargaro and Brad Binder separated by a point. Fabio Di Gianantonio and his teammate Marco Bezzecchi rounding out the top 10. In Moto 2, this past weekend, it was Ayagura getting the victory over Sergio Garcia, Jake Dixon rounding out the podium, Alcoba, Agius, whatever, Albert Arenas, Alonso Lopez, Joe Roberts finishes 8th, Tony Arbolino 9th, and Navarro 10th. You go through some of them other guys there. Manny Ramirez for American Racing Team was DQ'd out of the race. So, not good for him. The Moto 2 standings, Garcia now has a 19-point lead on Joe Roberts. Agura with his win gets to within 2 points of Roberts. Aldeguer and Alonso Lopez, the teammates, are tied for 4th. Then Aaron Canet, Albert Arenas, Gonzalez, Alcoba, and Arbolino round out your top 10. Only 3 non-Spaniards in the top 10, Roberts, Agura, and Arbolino. So it tells you most of the non-Spaniard riders are outside the top 10. I'm just curious I look through the flags to make sure I'm not missing anything, and I'm not in Moto 3 or in Moto E for that matter. I don't even know who a lot of those riders are. Javi Torres, I know. Oh, Chaz Davies. Oh, okay. Other than those two, never even heard of any of the other people. So there you go with that. They'll be at Mugello this coming weekend. Formula E was in Shanghai. They're now racing more actual circuits, albeit with some changes to the track to accommodate the Formula E and the electricity, having to go with the electric power versus full gas. They have a month break between this doubleheader they had and then the next doubleheader, which will be at Portland. The results of the first race saw Mitch Evans get the win over Pascal Wehrlein and Nick Cassidy, so the Jaguars both on the podium. Mitch Evans, a defending world champion, getting a win. Oliver Rowland, Jake Dennis, my bad, I said Mitch Evans. I always mix it up with Mitch Evans and Jake Dennis. But Jake Dennis, the world champion, finishes 5th. Jean-Eric Verne, Nick De Vries, Sebastian Buemi, Stoffel Van Dorn, Luca de Grassi, all they round out the top 10. That's 4, 5, 6. From 5th through 10th are all former champions of Formula E. That's pretty crazy how that all works out with that. The second race at Shanghai, Antonio Felix da Costa, speaking of a former champion, he's another one. Jake Hughes and Norman Nato round out your podium. Nick Cassidy, Mitch Evans, Van Dorn, Verne, Gunther, Freins, and Roland round out your top 10. So the standings heading to Portland in a month's time, Nick Cassidy still leads the points, very consistent, top 5 finishes, last few races. He's finished. He's had, ever since the first half of the doubleheader in Italy, he's finished no worse than 4th with two two second and 2 third place finishes and a win. So very consistent. When he does finish, he's only had one finish outside of 4th, and that was an 8th place in Japan. So that'll give you an advantage for sure. He's 25 points ahead of Pascal Wehrlein, 35 points ahead of Mitch Evans, his teammate and buddy, and then Oliver Rowland 4th, Jake Dennis in 5th. Jean-Eric Verne, Antonio Felix da Costa, Max Gunther, Stoffel Van Dorn, and then Jake Hughes with his 2nd place finish bounces himself up into the top 10 in points. 6 points ahead of Norman Nato and 8 points ahead of his teammate Sam Bird. So that's that. I mean, the battle for the championship right now, it's Cassidy's to lose. There's a tight battle for second between Wehrlein, Evans, and Rowland. Dennis would need to have a pretty strong last few races to defend his world championship in Formula E. I think NHRA is coming back. I mean, I know Moto America was on, Trans Am was on last week at Lime Rock, or this past weekend at Lime Rock for their Memorial Day Classic. New England Nationals for NHRA is this weekend, though. Coming weekend, the standings heading to Epping. I want to go and make sure we know which classes are racing right in this. So fuel. So yeah, Top Fuel, Funny Car, and Pro Stock. So we'll go and look at those point standings. In Top Fuel right now, Justin Ashley has a 71-point lead on Sean Langdon, and 111 on Doug Coletta, 121 Steve Torrance, 131 on Antron Brown, who won the last race. Billy Torrance, Clay Milliken, Tony Stewart, Tony Schumacher, and Brittany Force round out your top 10. Jasmine Salinas recently took over her dad's ride, so we'll see how she is able to keep moving up there. Josh Hart has struggled along with Sean Reed to get things going there. And Funny Car, Matt Hagan, 4-point lead on Austin Prock. It's very close in Funny Car, to be fair. 42 on John Force, J.R. Todd minus 53 in 4th, Bob Tasca minus 80 in 5th. So that's a good battle as it stands. And that doesn't even count the likes of Ron Capps, who's a former champion and won so many races. Wilkerson, Capps, DeJoria, Paul Lee, and Chad Green rounding out your top 10. You have some big hitters outside of the top 10. Blake Alexander driving for Jim Head's group, and then Cruz Pentragon in 12th. So we have to watch out for him in that car. And then in Pro Stock, Dallas Glenn has a 4-point lead on his teammate Greg Anderson. Erica Enders in 3rd, Jed Coughlin in 4th, Aaron Stanfield in 5th. You have Quadra. Those are all, and Jerry Tucker. And Troy Coughlin Jr. Basically all those cars up through David Quadra from 3rd through 9th are all elite motorsports connected vehicles, or elite motorsports cars itself. Brandon Foster rounding out the top 10. You have guys like, you have the McGaheys, you have Derek Kramer, who's a former race winner. Matt Hartford contended for the championship last year, outside of the top 10 in points right now. So, gotta see what those guys are doing or are able to do as they move forward in pro stock. And then, yeah, you got LE. Oh, so that's okay. That's in the Angie Smith. Because Gage Herrera seems to win every week. Richard Gadsden, Jason Zant, Hector Rana Jr., Steve Johnson, Mark Ingwerson. So we'll see when they come back for their next race. So put that in there. NHRA at Epping. New Hampshire, this is around the time where they would run at Englishtown. So the fact that Englishtown doesn't exist anymore as a drag racing facility is all the more depressing. The entry list, we'll get into the entry list for the Detroit Streets, the Chevy Detroit Sports Car Classic, which will see the GTP cars and the GTD Pros, so it'll be a small field, 21 cars. You have usual suspects, the two Cadillacs from Ganassi and Whelen Engineering, which is Action Express. Then you have the two private Porsches from Proton Competition, the Mustang Sampling Car and the JDC Miller car. The two Porsches from Penske, the two Wayne Taylor Racing Acuras, and then the two BMWs from Team ALL. Then in GTD Pro, Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, Paul Miller Racing, BMW, Jersey group there, at least a team. Antonio Garcia, Alexander Sims, and a Chevy Corvette. One of the two, Tommy Milner, Nicky Katzberg. Then you have the Pfaff McLaren, the two Vassar Sullivan Lexuses, 14 and 15. Then Carter Racing with Ross Gunn, Alex Riberas. Conquest Racing, Ferrari with Daniel Serra as our lead dog. Then the two Ford Mustangs with Multimatic and the AO Racing Porsche are rounding out the field there. We'll see how that all goes with Detroit, because it's the rough streets there as it was last year. We'll see how the carnage, if there is carnage. Then in Indy Lights, you have Detroit Grand Prix. They don't have the spotter guide there, but Jacob Abel leads Nolan Siegel by 25 points. Then you have Louis Foster in third, Kyle Collette, Miles Rowe, Michael D. Orlando, 4 through 6, separated by 5 points. Reese Gold, James Rowe, Callum Hedge, Jonathan Brown rounding out your top 10. Jamie Chadwick in 13th. Got Lindsay Brewer, who's an Instagram influencer, but ahead of Yuvan Sundaramurthy and Taylor Ferns, who's gonna race at Iowa, I believe. Recently graduated with her law degree and runs the USAC sprint cars on pavement. So we'll see how she does in the Indy Lights car on the oval here later on in the summer. And so that's the roundup. So let's move to the Cup truck doubleheader at Gateway. We'll also talk about Xfinity at Portland. So first we'll start trucks, the Toyota 200 at Gateway doesn't have an entry list available, which is lovely. I don't know. It says there's an entry list, and it says not click here for, so they don't have anything available. All right, so that's
Yeah,
that's
J-Ski's got
cute.
nothing for.
Yeah, so I'm on J-Ski 2. So go over there, see if there's anything. Trucks, they're doing that. And then 200. No, whatever. I'm not even gonna bother. They don't have anything there. Alex Pillow, Root Beer Floathead, you picked Rossi, at least you were closer. Will Byron, I was sort of close. Dennis Hamlin, and Allgaier, you were closer. I picked Clyde. Oh, look at that. I picked Clyde, and so that's so I can, I don't know what that's supposed to be, but I'm just going to use that Lucas Bobble. That's what I'm going to use for picking William Clyde Elliott as the winner there. Corey Heim, you had picked for trucks. Oscar Piastri, I'd picked for, and I had Eclair. We both had Eclair third, but all right. So, I started first last week, so you get to go first this week, Josh. Who do you pick for the Truck Series race at Gateway? And I'm pretty sure I know who the winner will be.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to go chalk here and pick Corey Heim, recover from that law or DQ here in last week. So yeah, I'll go with him. I'm trying to pull up the standings here for trucks because that's what I'm gonna have to go off of for this. But let's pull that up real quick. Da-da-da. Um, I'm gonna have to go with. Let me see. Hold on. Standings. I'll go with. Let's see where do you finish? Yeah, I'll go with Lane Riggs again as a wild card, standard pick, and everything with not having the injuries up just quite yet. We'll have to go with some standard picks here.
Yeah, that's basically the safe way to go and makes the most sense. Heim and Riggs. I think at some point it has to start turning around. For Lane Riggs, he had a good run at North Wilkesboro, so I would assume that some of that could move over to the event here at Gateway. For me, I'm just going to pick Christian Eckes because that's a chalk pick as well. He's basically the other dominant figure in the truck series at the moment. Likely contender for the championship, has the lead in the regular season standings. My pick as a wild card, it's somewhat difficult to say the least because of the quality of the field is really just drops off exponentially. You have people that run every race versus those that haven't run a lot. I will go with Bailey Curry. For no reason whatsoever. I don't have one other than he's outside of the top half, so that's why I picked him. He is driving for Nice. Nice has had some, I guess we could say, like, Nice has had some relative success at Gateway, especially with Ross Chastain a few years ago. So maybe it converts over for those guys there. Xfinity Series will be at Portland. No entry list as of yet for the Xfinity Series. There are announcements of drivers that are going to be in the field. At least one guy, Nathan Bird, will be driving the 92 for DGM. I think Josh Bilicki is going to be in. He'll be in the Gibbs number 19. So that's a big opportunity for Josh Bilicki, to say the least. You have Jade Buford racing for the 74 team, so that's another one. Yeah, so I mean that's the best of so yeah, so that's that makes it very difficult, to say the least, to go and make some picks. It is a road course, something that's not the easiest, especially with the Xfinity cars. I'm gonna go with the guy who won the race last year. I'm gonna go with Cole Custer. He got run over by Austin Hill last week. I figure this week he gets away from the RG Bargy and goes and gets another road course win at Portland to go and get his season kind of going, in a sense. My wild card selection, we look at how many drivers at 17. 25. I mean, that's 25, and then you have an additional, 3 guys or 4 guys that have run basically all the races. I don't really want to go that far, because then we'd basically have nobody to pick. Oh, there you go. I'll just pick SVG. The SVG falls in the second half cut as the wild card. His way to go and get into the playoffs, the easiest way to get in the playoffs is to win a road course race, and since he's on the second half, why not? Leaves AJ Allmendinger because it's the first half out there. You have other guys that could win road course races like Allgaier and the likes. I mean, Kligerman's another one, but Mayer. But yeah, why not SVG? How about you, Josh?
I will go with AJ Allmendinger to win this race here. And I guess wild card. This is hard because again we don't have all the entry list, but I'm look at the standings here real quick in Xfinity standings. Standings here. Damn.
Yeah, 13th is the cutoff.
13th.
So that's how SVG somehow or another.
Somehow or another he's in 15th now. Yeah. I don't know, this is out there. I'll go with Josh Williams. That's really out there, but stranger things have happened. So
yeah, you're going full Colleague here. You're all in on Colleague this weekend. I'm only halfway with Colleague. I'm hedging with SHR, but I think we're the biggest fans of Colleague, other than Chris Rice. Josh Williams So the three full-time quali cars, and we have picked all of them in some way, shape, or form. So there you go. For Portland, I mean, Allmendinger, the all-time winner in Xfinity Series history at road courses. So not out of the realm, I would say. There, the Josh Williams pick is definitely one that is wild. So we'll go with that one. Probably he'll end up finishing better in the SVG somehow, some way, because that's just the way things go for me when I make picks. The last one in terms of the NASCAR is the Enjoy Illinois 300, the next to last race for Fox this year. Thankfully, I mean, what's sad is, like, you mentioned it about Mike Joy, and he's actually kind of started getting his marbles back, probably taking Prevagen. And then you have Kevin Harvick, who's doing such a great job. But then you have Clint Boyer, who's an idiot. You have Michael Waltrip, who's a waste. You have pit road members that basically suck. I mean, it's like you have pieces of what could be a really great broadcast, but then you can't put anything else together. But somehow or another, because their money, the check's clear, they keep on keeping NASCAR. But I guess that's beside the point. All right, so we'll go to the points. It's probably because of the holiday weekend, so all that will be posted on Tuesday. Yeah, you picked their second there, so you get first dibs on the Cup Series, Josh.
I think for me here, I mean, it's pretty interesting, considering how the season has gone for some drivers. I'm gonna actually, this is out on a limb, but it'll make sense here. I'm gonna go and pick Joey Logano to get his first win of the season here, which, he won at the All-Star race last weekend at North Wilkesboro. So maybe he has some positive momentum coming out here, and he did win in 2022 at Gateway and was in the top 3 at Gateway last year. So I'll pick him as my wild card here. And I will, as my wild card here, I look at the standings and kind of go off of that. And I'm going to say, I'm going to pick Noah Gragson as a wild card here. So, yeah, we'll go with that, which I think he was running good in this race last year before he had a brake failure.
Big failure. Yeah, that was a problem for Legacy. It was also a problem for Spire, because I think
2311 too.
Yeah, they whatever, Corey LaJoy was god awful in the 9 car. I know that Carson Hocevar made his Cup debut in his car and then had issues. While running in the top 10, no less. So that's one thing. I mean, there's only 4 drivers that have finished in the top 10 at Gateway in the 2 races. Short history of this race: Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Martin Truex Jr. And Kyle Busch and Joey Logano have finished in the top 5 in both races, and they're the 2 winners at Gateway so far. So solid pick for you, Josh, in terms of Joey Logano. For me, I am going to go with Martin Truex Jr. to win. So I think is due for a win. He's been running pretty solid, just hasn't had the finishes to show for it in certain cases. So I feel like he's due for a win. Yeah, and my wild card there, so Martin Truex Jr. to win. And my wild card will be Carson Hocevar. He's been the best car at the Spire team this year. He made his debut there, so he has experience. I could have been compelled in theory to go with Chase Briscoe, since you got when you look at it, there's 35, so no, he wouldn't have been able to make it actually. Or 30, 17 is 34, so you actually are there's 35 drivers that have basically run every race. I guess we could start getting crazy with it, and then you take out those 3, so then it would have been 32. So yeah, Briscoe would have fallen under the top half, and Joey Logano is in wild card territory, but you picked him as a winner. And then you have Noah Gragson. I probably could have picked Josh Berry. I think, yeah, it's all right. You already got a SHR guy there, and we got a couple of Fords represented. So I'll go with my picks there, and we'll see what happens with that. Last but not least is IndyCar at Detroit for the second year. Back on the streets of Detroit after many years at Belle Isle. So they had 3 races there many years ago. Last year in this race was Alex Palou. He led 74 of the race's 100 laps. Will Power finished second, Felix Rosenqvist third, Scott Dixon, Alexander Rossi rounding out the top 5. So 2 Arrow McLaren cars in the top 5. Kyle Kirkwood, McLaughlin, Marcus Armstrong, Marcus Ericsson, and Josef Newgarden rounding out the top 10. And then Callum Ilott was involved in the first lap wreck. Pato Award had issues, etc., etc. So we will get into that. So for me, IndyCar at Detroit, it is a Chevy Grand Prix. So I'll pick Alex Palou just because it's a Chevy. They had such a bad month that he won the last race prior to the 500 in the Indy road course. It's Alex Palou. He's just good at basically everywhere except ovals. But I'm gonna go and pick him to continue his momentum. And then in terms of the point standings in IndyCar, we got the full standings there. And you have 22, 24 drivers that have made every start. If you want to get really crazy with it, Jack Harvey has raced 4 out of the 5 races. But I'm not, so I'm going to go. So that eliminates that group there. So, and do I go full Ganassi? It really makes sense for me to go full Ganassi here. Just based on last year's results. I will go. I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with Marcus Armstrong. So I'm hedging full Ganassi. Armstrong as a wild card to go and have a good weekend this weekend. Probably left up at least one guy. Maybe he could get as far as 3 or 4 that might have also been in play, but that's your call, Josh. You get to close the deal before we get into your sim segment. So let us know who you're taking for Detroit.
Go with I will go with Scott Dixon here to win. So solid pick there. Scott, of course, I mean he ran fourth here last year, so yeah, I mean it was I think last year it was Alex Palou and Will Power Dom kind of trading it, but um Scott Dixon, I think he's got a good shot um and everything. So I think well my wild card,
Won the last street course
yeah,
race
and
too
he
at
did
Long
too.
Beach.
Yeah, that is too. So that is very true. So I mean, with that, uh, I will make my wild card here. I guess we're gonna go by standings here. I mean, I'll go with Renus VK, who I don't know if I look at last year what he did previous race last year. Let's see, where did he finish? He finished in 18th last year, so he's got a lot of work cut out for him to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would have. I was thinking either VK or Grim Rehal. Picking Grosjean is at your own risk. Linus Lundqvist, who had a bad month of May. Marcus Ericsson, who's basically in recovery mode. And Canapino. I mean, there's a lot of guys. I mean, it shows how deep the field is. Then you have Teo Porcher, who's going to race the rest of the season, and so we'll see what he's able to do this weekend at Detroit as he takes over the 6 car full time. Yeah, so that's our previews and our picks for the races this weekend. Josh, let us know what you did in your racing last weekend and your prep for the iRacing Indy 500.
So iRacing, part of their special events on the NASCAR side, they have the Coke 600, which I did last year, and saw that it was happening again this year. It was going to be this weekend, so decided to take some time on Thursday night to go ahead and do that. Do it on Thursday and get it over with, then continue on with the rest of the weekend. So the Thursday night 9 p.m. session, I went ahead and competed in that uh, edition, and started 18th place, and then I ended up finishing in 19th. And I made my way throughout the field. I got to the top 10 before the first green flag pit stops, and then kind of stayed out on that cycle until it was time to come into to pit, and got up to 5th and felt daytime. I felt pretty comfortable with picking off guys throughout the field, and taking advantage of or taking care of my tires and all that, and then taking advantage of other guys. But yeah, after that, kind of settled back into kind of around that range, right outside the top 10. And then the second pit stop that was under green, I came out off of pit road and made a mistake, touching the kind of going briefly over the pit road blend line on the apron, kind of going over that very briefly, and then going back, onto the apron and everything. And then on iRacing, that's a penalty if you go over the crossover of the blend line. Even if you come back over it, if you just cross it, it's a penalty there for unsafe pit exit. So had to go through the drive-through penalty, and lost a lap there. So I spent a good part of the race lap down, and was fighting to get back onto the lead lap, and then got up to the second car a lap down, I think sitting in like 18th position or so. So I think I forgot how much part of the race I spent as a lap down, but it was a good part there, probably at least a fuel run, at least a lap down. And then going through that, there's a bit of a stack up on the outside lane coming off of a restart, and I was trying to get to be the first car lap down so I could get my lap back on the next caution. And there's a stack up on the outside lane, and then kind of trying to avoid it, ended up kind of spinning out and then going into the inside wall in the backstretch. But I didn't take up too much damage, so only had about like maybe a minute or so of repairs to be made in the game. So was able to get that mostly repaired and then continue on. And then I think the next caution after that stack up that I was in, got the lucky dog, and then eventually got my way into the top 10 again, and then stayed within that top 10, 12 range until the last pit stop with about like lap 340. The last caution was like a lap 292 of the race, so stayed up until lap 340 there, and then decided to pit early to try to get my last stop in and not worry about fuel anymore, and then made it to the pit stop and ended up netting to the top 5, and I thought I was going to be good. Then started to lose pace and then drop back to 6th, and was just trying to hold on to the end. And then I had about a second on 7th and 8th place, sitting in 6th place, coming off of turn 4 with about 6 laps to go. And I think I just pushed it just a little too hard, trying to maintain my gap, and tires were wearing out, and I was losing time to the guys behind me, and then hit the wall pretty hard. Actually, I got loose off of turn 4, and then I overcorrected and hit the wall pretty hard. And so then that kind of ended my day, or night, I guess, whatever. And got back to pit road and then pitted, but there was too much damage left. And when I got back out, the toe was all messed up, and it was basically impossible to really accelerate the car. So it was basically just driving on the apron for 2 laps to finish the race. And so ended up in 19th place there. So it was a good run up until the end, but just hit the wall there, which I think last year, I forgot where I finished. I think like 8th place or something like that, and finished. But a lot of green flag runs there in the 600 in my split, and they only had 7 cars on lead lap, 9 cautions. So yeah, it was definitely a lot of, because I had at least like 3 or 4 green flag pit stops there. And last year, I don't even think I had any, and maybe 1 at the most towards the end there. But this one, yeah, very uneventful in terms of having lots of yellows. So kind of played out like a real Coke 600 would, before stages, with the kind of the endurance race feel that it had, where you had to kind of know when to pit and take advantage of the fuel and all of that. So and the tires were a factor here too. So lots of people on different strategies, whether they are trying to pit early and get it over with, or stay out as long as possible and have better tires at the end. So that was interesting race there. And physically I was feeling okay, I guess. Sim racing is not real racing, but I was still a little bit sore with my legs, with especially like doing a lot of braking and a lot of lifting in the corners. Started to feel it in my legs, and I guess the steering as well. There's definitely some times where you're steering back to the right coming off the turn 4, trying to prevent it from spinning out, I guess, and kind of started to feel a little bit sore there. So nothing too much there, but it was definitely like, compared to like the Daytona 500 or something like that, where you're just kind of flat footing it the whole time for the most part. And it's more of a mental chess match, I guess. Like, I was like, well, do I want to do this again later in the weekend or something? And I was like, yeah, probably not, because sitting around for 4 hours in the sim chair was starting to get kind of a little sore there at the end. But nothing like a real Coke 600, I'm sure. But that was that. I was trying to, I guess, do my own version of the double, so not a real double, but certainly do both races and everything. So we'll try again next time, I guess, there. But the other one, of course, and talking about what we've been waiting for since the end of 2022, the iRacing Indy 500, of course. Been kind of prepping for that by doing practice and running host sessions against other people and everything, and the iRacing IndyCar series on the server. There they had the 125 lap race at Indy with open setup, which decided to do that on Saturday there. Used my setup from my winning run at the Indy 500 in 2022. Ran well, was able to, I started in 24th. Didn't use a good qualifying setup on purpose because I was trying to see how the race setup would feel like since I didn't really have any practice time and all that. But so ran 24th and got up to 5th and was running up in the top three at 1.2. So until the final pit stop. So I had multiple pit road mistakes. Overshot. I think I overshot my pit like once under caution because I didn't know where my pit stop was. So had to go in reverse there for a minute to go back to my pit and everything. And then I think did I have a drive? I had a drive through, but it was early on, so it was not a huge issue because I got saved by a caution at some point. So I got saved there, and but eventually, finished in fifth place. So in this like 312-mile Indy race there. So good practice there for the Indy 500, of course. Definitely going to be a track position race. It seems like passing on the inside is easier. Passing on the outside doesn't work quite as well because they kind of resurfaced in the game. They kind of they updated the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and rescanned it and everything. So it's actually quite updated now compared to what it was before. So it looks a lot more like what it looks like now as compared to when they scanned it back in like 2008. So a lot of updates since then and everything. And outside line doesn't quite work as well if you're trying to make a pass like on the outside, like what we saw like Newgarden do or you know Alexander Rossi do multiple times over the years. So it's gonna be a little bit different. But you can still make it work. But you got to really have a lot of commitment to be able to do it. So feel good though about it overall. So we'll see how it goes. The Open Series session is on Friday, May 31, 9 p.m. So looking to do that, maybe possible backup date later on in the weekend with either the fixed series or the Open Series set up there. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, definitely looking forward to doing this. Of course, iRacing IndyCar had the dis you know dissolution of the IndyCar series back at the end of 2022, and they thought they had iRacing or with IndyCar and Motorsport games trying to make their own game, and then kind of left iRacing out to dry there. But now it's back. They've agreed to come back together for the future, and now the Indy 500, which I think is probably the original iRacing special event and definitely one of the marquee events on iRacing, is back. So yeah, like we said at the top of the show, trying to go for the second one, and I can call myself a two-time Indy 500 winner on iRacing. So we'll see how it goes. So definitely looking forward to competing on that. So the iRacing stuff, of course, the Coke 600 on Twitch, of course, and then the iRacing Indy 500 on Twitch as well. So later this week. So we'll be sure to let everybody know when that happens. Which looking around Friday at 9 p.m. I'm intending to do that, and hopefully nothing else comes up to prevent me from that. But of course, there'll be multiple opportunities throughout the weekend. But I'll be sure to remind people when that happens. And of course, that's at Twitch TV, uSailor2 on there. So we'll go on there and stream that, and hopefully have a good run, of course. And then, of course, the Twitter at JP Huffine, which going on there and talking about all things related to the 600, the Indy 500 and all that, all my other opinions and all that go on there. And then, of course, our YouTube channel at Gripster Podcasts, and go like, subscribe, and comment and all that stuff. And look at our videos and or listen or whatever you want to do. So yeah, I mean, glad to talk about it, of course, and um, happy Memorial Day, of course, and glad to have the freedom to be able to go and do this, of course. And I mean, I don't have any, family members lost, of course, but of course, my father served in the Navy and everything, so thankful for his service and all that. So, of course, I mean, that's really Veterans Day, which is later in the year, but still, the service, serving in the military and um, doing that is something that's a very honorable um, thing to do. So, I'm very, very glad for the freedom to be able to go out and express our opinion here out on this show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful to my cousin who served in the army and other family that is first responders. And, in terms of this day, I mean, that's what this is all about. It's not about barbecues or, it being a day off. It's one to go and respect those who made the ultimate sacrifice. But it all, and we do that solemnly, but we also celebrate, on the other hand, greatest day in motorsports. Three of the biggest races in the world all happening on the same day. And I'll look forward to doing it again next year for the sixth time in 2025. But plenty of 2024 to go here, and we'll talk about everything going on next week on the GSP. You can find me at PGMatthew28 on Twitter. You can find me at PhilipGMatthew28 on Instagram. You can find us philipgmatthew.com. That's my WordPress site. I just paid to keep that, so you'll find the Gripster podcast there. You find it on Podbean. Basically, anywhere you hear podcasts, you can listen to Gripster podcast. So with that, we'll be back next week for episode 223 and talk about Detroit. We'll talk about Gateway, Portland, preview the Canadian Grand Prix, and everything else going on in the world of racing here on the Gripster podcast. So for Josh, I'm Phil. We'll see you next time on the GSP.